This job. Let me turn this on. Long-term team players needed for challenging permanent work in an often chaotic environment. Candidates must possess excellent communication and organizational skills and be willing to work variable hours, which will include evenings and weekends and frequent 24-hour shifts on call. Some overnight travel required, including trips to primitive camping sites on rainy weekends and endless sports tournaments in faraway cities. Travel expenses not reimbursed. Extensive courier duties also required. Responsibilities, the rest of your life. Must be willing to be hated, at least temporarily, until someone needs $5. Must be willing to bite tongue repeatedly. Also must possess the physical stamina of a pack mule and be able to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3 seconds flat, in case this time the screams from the backyard are not someone just crying wolf. Must be willing to face stimulating technical challenges such as small gadget repair, mysteriously sluggish toilets, and stuck zippers. Must screen phone calls, maintain calendars, and coordinate production of multiple homework projects. Must have ability to plan and organize social gatherings for clients of all ages and mental outlooks. Must be willing to be indispensable 1 minute and embarrassment the next. Must handle assembly and product safety testing of 500,000 cheap plastic toys and battery-operated devices. Must always hope for the best but be prepared for the worst. Must assume final, complete accountability for the quality of the end product. Responsibilities also include floor maintenance and janitorial work throughout the facility. Possibility for advancement and promotion? Virtually none. Your job is to remain in the same position for years without complaining, constantly retraining and updating your skills so that those in your charge can ultimately surpass you. Previous experience? None required, unfortunately. On-the-job training offered on a continually exhausting basis. Wages and compensation. Get this, you pay them. Offering frequent raises and bonuses. A balloon payment is due when they turn 18 because of the assumption that college will help them become financially independent. When you die, you give them whatever is left. The oddest thing about this reverse salary scheme is that you actually enjoy it and wish you could only do more. Benefits. While no health or dental insurance, no pension, no tuition reimbursement, no paid holidays, no stock options are offered, this job supplies limitless opportunities for personal growth and free hugs for life if you play your cards right. I also read one time where moms, if they were paid for the work they did, their annual salary would be $138,095. I don't know how they came up with that. I actually think that's a little low. Would you agree with me? Say amen. Moms, man, they do so much, don't they? What an incredible gift. But let's back up from moms just for a minute and just go even before their moms, a wife. What an incredible gift. Sir, if you have a lady sitting next to you today that puts up with you and tolerates you and is faithful to you, man, you have an incredibly precious and valuable gift. The Bible, as a matter of fact, says, who can find a virtuous woman? Her price is far above rubies. No way you can pay for that. And then if that lady is on top of that, a good mom to your children, my soul. And if you have a mom, man, let me tell you, you ought to thank God for them. Amen. In the book of Ruth, let's start with chapter 1. We're going to go through a good bit of Ruth here, little by little. We find this incredible story. As a matter of fact, it was Ben Franklin, when he was in Paris, he would often go to converse with members of the Infidel Club. It was a group of philosophers who spurned the Bible. They spent much of their time searching for and discussing masterpieces of literature and art. for his amusement one day, Ben Franklin announced to him that he found an ancient manuscript worthy of their consideration. Oh, you've got to read it to us. Let us hear this story. So he then read to them the book of Ruth while changing the names of the characters and the locale so that it would not be recognized as a story from the Bible. When he was finished, they were unanimous in their praise, and they said, man, we have never heard anything like this. This is one of the most touching stories we've ever heard. You've got to tell us where you found it. And much to his delight, he said, this story is right from the Bible. This tremendous story of a mom and a daughter-in-law. This has taken place in a day when Israel did not have a king yet. As a matter of fact, Judges chapter 17 verse 6 says, in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Everybody just doing what they thought was right. Can you imagine the chaos that would ensue if that's how we were ruled today? It was a time of apostasy, people turning from God, a time of war, a time of decline, a time of violence and moral decay and anarchy. And in the midst of this tumultuous time, we have this story of a lady named Naomi. Her and her husband and her two sons, they left their town in Israel because of a famine, and they went to a distant land. And while they were there, her two sons each marry a daughter or a lady from that land. And they're getting along okay, but then her husband died, and then both of her sons died. And so now she says, man, I don't understand. We left because of a famine. We came here. We're doing pretty good. And now the Lord has taken my husband. The Lord has taken both of my sons. And she tells her daughters-in-law, listen, I'm going back to where I'm from, back to Israel. You stay here. Go back to your families. In verse number 16 of chapter 1, the Bible says, and Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. Man, one of the sweetest two verses in the Bible I've ever read. As Naomi has told her two daughters-in-law, listen, you go back to your people, I'm heading back. Here's Ruth, the other one says, okay, I'll go back. But Ruth, she falls down at Naomi's feet and she said, please don't send me away. Look, I am in this. When I married your son, I married into your family. I am in this for the long haul. Now, the custom was that when a husband died like that the wife, so that they could bring up a husband's namesake, she would marry the next younger brother. And Naomi had no more children, and she said, listen, I have no more sons to provide for you, to have a husband that will take care of you. And even if I did, now I'm past the time of having children, but if I did, you're not going to wait that long. And Ruth says, no, listen, I'm in this for the long haul. Wherever you go, that's where I'm going. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Man, what an illustration of faith. What an illustration of faithfulness far beyond the call of duty. I want to look at some things here. And moms, wives, I want you to consider and ask if these things can be found in you. Number one, I want to look first at the faith of Naomi. Her husband had decided to leave their hometown because there was a famine. They went to a place called Moab. While they're in Moab, both her husband and both of her sons die. Now notice that in spite of these consequences, we don't find anywhere in the scriptures where she complains or where she begins to criticize the Lord. In verse number 6, as a matter of fact, look there, it says, then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. So she acknowledges God even here and says, listen, he's blessing my hometown again. He has visited our people. I'm going to go back. In verses number 8 through 9, she blesses her daughters-in-law. And listen to the words she uses. The Lord deal kindly with thee. The Lord grant you that. Even in the midst of these hardships, in the midst of losing basically everything she had, there's something within Naomi that keeps holding tightly to her God. As a matter of fact, there was something in Naomi that caused Ruth to want to stay with her. Now, I don't know for sure, but just from hearing Naomi's speech here, I feel that it may have been her undying faith in her God. You know, there's something about seeing a follower of Christ in the midst of hard times, in the midst of difficult times, in the midst of those adverse times, those times where things just don't seem to be going right, those times where some would raise their fist and shake it at God, when that believer, that follower of God, in the midst of those hard times, just holds tightly to their God and says, listen, if I die, I die. If I perish, I perish. If it gets worse, it gets worse. But man, God, I'm not going to forsake you. I'm not going to start trusting in you. It's in those dark times that the believer shines brightest. And here's Naomi now. She's getting ready to go back. Ruth is evidently still somewhat of a young lady. And Naomi releases her of any obligations and says, Ruth, listen, your sister-in-law, she's already gone. Go ahead. You don't have to do this. You don't have to go with me. But there was something in her. Something in Naomi that as Ruth looked at her, she said, no, look, there's something in you that I want more than I want to be with my own family I grew up with. There's something I see in you that will compel me to travel with you to your people, and I'm going to let those people become my people. And your God, the God you faithfully serve, the God that you have asked to bless us, that's the God I want to serve. Let me ask you something, moms, wives. What does your family see in you? I mean, overall. When they observe you in day-to-day life. This one girl I know from many years ago recently posted something online on Facebook. Her child had to fill out like what was that, like a survey or something, or what was it? A little questionnaire about their mom as Mother's Day. And one of the things that said, you know, kids are brutally honest, aren't they? Please don't hand my children a questionnaire about their dad. And one of the things that said was, when she gets upset, my mom likes to cuss. She's like, oh my goodness. So let me ask you, what is it that your family sees in you? Not just when everything is going bad, not just on Sunday, but yes, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and even Saturday. What is it they see in you? What is it they see in you? Not just when everything's going good, when there's plenty of money and where nothing is broken down, which if you're in a house with 5 children, something's always broken down. But not just in those times, but man, when things are strained. When all of a sudden you're living paycheck to paycheck, and even then you're saying, God, I don't think the next paycheck's going to be enough to cover it. God, you're going to have to provide for us. What is it your children see in you? What is it they see in you when you're annoyed? When you're frustrated? Moms, you ever get annoyed or frustrated? You know, you try to find some place where you can be alone for just a few minutes. You go to the bathroom, shut the door, lock the door, and then little fingers come up under the door. The children have followed you all the way there. What is it they see in you? What is that they see in you, Mom, when relationships are strained? Do they see faithfulness? Do they see selflessness? Let me read a little story to you. It says, several years ago in a tropical country where many Americans were living, a terrifying eye disease struck. It affected primarily children. American children were seemed to be more vulnerable, apparently due to an immune deficiency. The signs of the disease were unmistakable. 5 days after the first symptoms appeared, the child would begin to go blind. One morning, one of the American mothers awoke to see all the symptoms of the disease in her little girl's eyes. She immediately took her to the doctor, only to have her worst fears confirmed. Holding back the tears, the mother then took her daughter by the hand and walked her to a nearby field. The mother picked up her child and held her. She told her to notice how the sunlight lit the landscape dotted with wild flowers. The mother then picked one of the yellow flowers, placed it in her daughter's hand, and they carefully examined together the lovely, complicated structure that only God could make. Then the mother turned the little girl's face toward her own. "What color is my hair?" she asked. "Black, Mommy, black and pretty." "And my eyes, look at them. What color are they?" "Blue, blue like the sky," she said, patting her mother's face. And as the mother looked into her daughter's eyes, soon to go dim, she asked, "And what do you see in your mother's eyes?" "Love, Mommy. I see love." Moms, what does your husband see when he looks in your eyes? What do those children see when they look in your eyes? What do they see when they look at your life, the day-to-day living, when things aren't going so well, when relationships are strained, when life is confusing, when life seems to be crashing down around you, when it seems that one wave of adversity is followed only by another wave of adversity, only followed by a seemingly bigger wave of adversity, and you don't see any way out, what is it they see in you? And Naomi, I believe Ruth, one of the things she saw was an unwavering faith in her God. Moms, and let me say dads as well for just a moment. More than anything, our children need parents that unwaveringly love and pursue Jesus Christ. Let me qualify that. I'm not talking about just religious parents. I'm not talking about just somebody who comes to church and they put on their tie and they carry the family Bible under their arm and they're good on Sunday. I'm talking about someone who day by day, when it's inconvenient, when it's not easy, still pursues the Christ they say they love. There was something about Naomi that compelled Ruth to say, "Hey, I'm leaving everything I have ever known, and I'm going where you go, and I'm going to worship the God you worship." We see not only the faith of Naomi, but we see the faith of Ruth. In verses 14 through 18, we just read a couple of those verses. I won't do it again. But we see this faith, this blind stepping out, saying, "Hey, if the God you serve is as real as you make him to seem, then I've not known the God. I did not grow up learning about this God, but I tell you what, I'm choosing to follow that God." I once heard the word faith defined with an acrostic, F-A-I-T-H, standing for this: forsaking all, I trust him. Forsaking all, I trust him. There's an animal in Africa, a cat or an animal called an impala. An impala can jump to the height of over 10 feet and cover a distance of greater than 30 feet. Can you imagine that? Yet they can be kept in an enclosure in a zoo with just a 3-foot wall. Isn't that crazy? The reason is the animals will not jump to where they cannot see where their feet will fall. So though they can jump 10 foot high, though they can jump and cover a distance of 30 feet, you put up just a 3-foot wall that they cannot see over, they can't see where their feet would land, and they will not jump. Faith is that ability to trust what we cannot see. And with faith, we're freed from these flimsy enclosures of life. Ruth had not seen Naomi's people. Now think about this, folks. Ruth had not seen Naomi's people. Ruth had not been in Naomi's land. Ruth had not seen Naomi's home. Ruth had not grown up learning about Naomi's God. But she had seen Naomi's faith in her God and decided to place her faith in that same God. Wives, moms, what do your families see when they see you? I can't speak as a mom for obvious reasons, but as a dad, my desire is that they see Christ. It's not that I want them coming to the casket one day and saying, he was a good man. I don't want to just be known as a good man. I want them to remember, hey, my dad was like Christ. Boy, that's what I'd hope. Not only do we see faith in their life, but we see favor. Look in Ruth chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. And Naomi had a kinsman. Now, here's what happened. Naomi has now gone back to her hometown. She's taken Ruth with her. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. So here's what happens. Ruth, hard-working lady, she has now taken the responsibility of looking after her mother-in-law. She didn't have to do that. She was given leave, but she saw something in Naomi. She saw that faith, wanted to follow. So she goes back, and now she says, listen, we have nothing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go find a field where they're harvesting, and I'm going to see if I can glean what's left over behind the harvesters. And those who were poor, those who were without, would go to the field, and those people, if they had favor on them, they would allow them to follow those who were harvesting the wheat or whatever and pick up whatever was left that had been left there. Ruth starts out gleaning in a field to make a living for her and her mother-in-law. There was some element of danger to this. She could have been driven away. They could have embarrassed her, humiliated her, and said, hey, get out of this field. You have no part in this field. We don't want you around here. She could have been harmed by one of the young men. She's a single young lady, evidently an attractive young lady. One of the men who were less than honorable could have come along and harmed her. Nevertheless, the owner of the field happens by, asks about her, says, who is this? And they begin to say, hey, that one right there, you talking about that one right there? That's Ruth. Have you not heard about Ruth? You know, you had a kin named Elimelech who married Naomi. Oh, yeah, I remember Elimelech and Naomi. Look, Ruth married Naomi's son, and he died while they were in Moab. And when she came back, this lady Ruth, she left her people, left her land, and she's come back to take care of her mother-in-law. Boy, what faithfulness. And now she's out here working. And I want to tell you what, Boaz, that lady is a hard worker right there. Look in chapter 2, verses 8. We'll look at verse 11, as a matter of fact. And Boaz answered and said unto her, it hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother, and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not heretofore. The Lord recompense thy work, or pay you back, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Then she said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord. For that thou hast comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, though I be not like unto one of thine handmaids. And Boaz said unto her, at mealtime come hither, and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was sufficed and left. So Boaz hears her story, and he says, and he begins to talk to her, and he said, look, at lunchtime, you come in and eat with the rest of my main workers that I hire. He goes on to tell her, listen, you can keep on gleaning in my fields. Make sure you're in my field. And he goes to the young men, and he said, all right, hey, listen, fellas, listen, hands off. Don't you lay a finger on this young lady right here. This is an honorable lady. She finds favor in his sight. How do we find favor? What about her caused him to say, hey, we're going to treat her with some great honor. We're going to find favor in her. There's a couple things. Number one, Ruth was selfless. Man, we read about her, and there was nothing about her where she was consumed with self. It was all about the other person. We see that Ruth had faith. She came to follow this new God that she saw her mother-in-law following. We find that Ruth, in being selfless, she was also a servant. She gave herself to others. Our society, has it not become a selfish society? You hear of moms now that take the life of their own children because of an inconvenience or because of an annoyance. In Ruth 3:11, it says this, and now, my daughter, fear not, I will do to thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. Here's Boaz saying, listen, everything you're asking of me, I'm going to make sure your needs are met. As a matter of fact, he ends up marrying her. And he goes out of his way to be able to set that up. There was another man that was in line according to their customs and their laws. And Boaz sets it up where he can be the one to marry her. And he says, listen, everybody, all the people of this city knows, Ruth, that you are a virtuous woman. You are one who gives yourself to others. Mom, I know sometimes being a mom is a thankless job, it seems like. Sometimes you feel like you're out on an island. I know sometimes you probably get to feeling like, boy, I'm just doing this all myself. I'm having to carry so much a load, I just don't know if I can do it. I have no me time. I can never focus on me. Let me tell you something, Mom. You are doing one of the greatest works that God has ever given. We find that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. The Bible says it was his faith and obedience that gained God's favor, God's grace. Listen to Proverbs 3:3-4, and talking about how to find favor. Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck. Write them upon the table of thine heart. So shalt thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Ruth made this choice to follow Naomi and to follow God without the promise of favorable conditions. Did you catch that? She didn't say, hey, Naomi, I tell you what, I'll go with you, and if things are going good and things are prosperous and you can find me another husband, then I'll stick with you. No, she just said, hey, I'm going with you. Your people are my people. Your God's my God. I am in it all the way. We take those marriage vows for better or for what? Or worse. Until what do we part? Till death do us part. And those are big words. We say them so easily at the marriage altar because we think we'll never have to live those things. But let me tell you, worse is going to come in one form or another. And there's going to be times where you might wish for someone's death. Ruth, Naomi, they were ladies of faith. They were ladies of favor. Let me tell you something, ladies. You are being watched. And I don't mean you're being watched. Somebody's watching saying, boy, I wonder what they're doing wrong right now. Well, let's write it down, keep a lit eye. You are setting an example. You are pouring something into someone's life. Whether it's good or bad, whether it's faith or faithlessness. Here's the last thing. Faith, favor. Last one, family. Look in Ruth chapter 4. We'll start at verse 13. I'll read just a little ways. I will not read it all. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife, and he went in unto her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bare a son. And the women said unto Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, which hath not left thee this day without a kinsman, that his name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of thy life, and a nourisher of thine old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which loveth thee, which is better to thee than 7 sons, hath borne him. Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom, and became nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generation, and it begins to give a genealogy. There's 41 genealogies listed in the Bible. Genealogies are a picture of God's faithfulness. That God, anytime you read a genealogy, you're seeing that God was faithful. It started out here, and that person had a son, 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 and all the way God was working his promises out in those people. In the genealogies, we see the faithfulness of God from generation to generation. With just a little bit of study, you can see the plan of God unfolding from one generation to another. Because of the faith exhibited by Naomi and Ruth, and because of the favor they obtained from God, God allowed them to be in the family line of the one who would change the world. Ruth had this son named Obed. Obed had a son named Jesse. Jesse had a son named David. And through David's line on down, we see Jesus Christ comes onto this earth. By Naomi's words, she had left full and returned empty. That's what she said as she came back to Israel, to her hometown, and they say, hey, is this Naomi? And she said, look, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. It means bitter. She said, I left full, though it was an empty time. I had my sons and I had my husband, and now I've come back. I have absolutely nothing. I left empty, now I've come back, or I left full, I came back empty. But in verse 17 it says this, and the women or neighbors gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi. Naomi, he's restored to you. He's given you a family once again. So moms, let me just plead with you for just a moment. This family that God gave you, in all its imperfections and inconveniences, in all the turmoil, my wife's new motto for life is embrace the chaos. That's our home. It's chaos constantly. I mean, it's just chaotic. In the midst of all that chaos in that family, don't forget this, God gave that family to you. And that is your family. I've been teaching on Wednesday nights about discipleship. It's the one mission Christ gave us. The only mission we've been given is to make disciples, win people to Christ and train them to follow Christ and lead others to Christ. Okay, that's the one mission we've been given. Do you know where that's supposed to start? In your home. You've been given a family to disciple, to train, to love Christ and to follow Him even when it's difficult. Let me ask you, moms, let me ask you, wives, when your family looks at you, what do they see? Do they see Christ? Is that what they see? Let's strive to make that so. Those children you have, that husband you have, you fill yourself up with Jesus and pour yourself into that family that God has given you. I want to tell you what, I understand it may be hard, but God's going to bless you. God's going to bless you, and He'll strengthen you. He'll meet your needs. Hold tightly to Him, moms. Your children need you to. Let's bow our head and close our eyes, please.